If you ever wondered how you can turn the Ableton Arpeggiator into some more generative and creative type sequencer, this video could be for you, because in just a few minutes we will set up this cute little device here that gives you the basic sound of the Arpeggiator, but in addition to it, so this would be the basic sound, you can add a bit of variation in pitch based on the tonality, bring in some octaves for just making the sound a little more bright and dynamic, and also you can bring in some gaps, so you break this kind of arpeggio character where all positions are always going to be triggered, which can sound a bit static after a while. And this way really create your own generative type sequences in just a few steps. So let's get right into it. The Arpeggiator has some different playing modes, but the problem is they don't really change our problem, because then you have different arrangements of the individual chord tones, but still it will keep the same repetitive vibe, so we need some other tools for breaking it. And let's first tackle the pitch. So you can add some MIDI effect called random that randomly generates some additional pitches. So if the chance is increased, so at 0 nothing happens, and at 100% the melody will be completely random, you actually create some probability for this event to happen. And choices is actually the amount of notes that can happen. So if it's on 1, there's only going to be one choice. So you see, sometimes we have some additional note that is just one halftone next to the actual note that is in the MIDI clip. But if you increase this, you will get a larger range. And also with the scale, you will get some larger octave range. Basically multiplies the choices amount. But again, we have a problem. Now it's completely random and out of tune, so it doesn't really sound that great, unless sometimes there are those moments where you want to create this type of vibe. But we have to use it in relation to our tonality. And there's another great effect called scale that helps us bringing our randomly generated melodies back into perspective. And if you open the sub-menu, you can see that you already have presets for all the scales, or not all the scales, but lots of scales, common scales that are often used. And if you have no idea what this means, don't worry, you can basically go into your MIDI clip and check your own tonality. So here we can click fold, and then you see all those different pitches you used. And if you click scale, you can highlight them. And if all lanes will be highlighted, that means that you actually found a tonality that fits. So here in this case it would be C. If I would go for E, I would see, okay, there are actually 3 notes that are not highlighted, so it's going to be another one. You can actually go through this. And usually this way you find your tonality, and also this way we will stick to major scales. So you see here some simple major scale, and this one you can just drag behind the random effect. Since our chord progression is in C, it's fine that the bass is on C, but if you have some chord progression, let's say E, you have to change this to E. So always pick the tonality here. And now you can see that once we create our random notes, they'll all be in the scale of C and therefore make sense together with the original arpeggio. And with the choices, you can now control how big the variations are going to be, because if you leave this at some small value, it won't move too far away from the original pitch that is created at a particular spot, so it's a more smooth experience compared to higher values. Personally, I like to keep it at some small value, because this way those melodies sound a little more smooth. But you remember from the intro that we also had a knob for bringing in those occasional octaves, which I like a lot, and we can just use another random plugin for that. And again, maybe chance 29%. We'll map it later anyway, so we can change that all the time with this little device. And now what we do is putting choices to 1 and scale to 12. And now there's also some 29% chance that sometimes we'll have some note triggered some octave higher, and I like this sound a lot. And one more thing I like is to add some velocity effect Actually, doesn't really matter where, it can also come behind the scale. And increase the random amount, because if you use some arpeggiator like this, you always have kind of a static velocity. I mean, here you can give it some kind of direction that until the end of a sequence there's some higher velocity. It's kind of fun to play with it, but I prefer to use the random here. So we just make the sound a little less predictable. So sometimes it's a little softer, sometimes a little louder. And also depending on what sound you have here, it will most likely react to velocity. So either it's only for the volume, but sometimes with synthesizers, they also have some filter that sounds a bit brighter when the velocity is higher, or duller if the velocity is lower. And this way your sequences just sound more musical and less predictable. Next I want to show you how we can bring in this rhythmic variation, and it's a trick that is a little out of the box maybe, but I like it a lot. I've been using it in some other recent videos and I think it's just totally perfect for creating generative music in Ableton Live. And important is that your sound is in some instrument rack. So here you see I have some instrument rack. If for some reason you only have a plugin, like let's say here you have this analog instance, can be any other plugin, also third party, you can just press Command and G and you'll have some instrument rack. And the important thing is that your instrument rack has something called chain selector. So you have to open this sub menu here and then click on chain. The chain selector can seem a little confusing, but the main idea is that in instrument racks you can have different lanes of instruments. And here you can define what kind of instrument is going to be triggered at what position of this chain selector here. So if the chain selector is here, we don't have any sound, but if we move it to the blue section, we have sound. And for this trick, we're going to put it to 64. And then we go to our audio effects and more precisely to the modulators. There's something called LFO. LFOs are amazing because we can map them to anything like the chain selector. We have to change this to a rhythmical definition to 16th notes. And instead of a sine wave, you use some random wave. Then we click map, click it to the chain selector, map it to the chain selector. And if we play our sequence now, you see, because it's sometimes jumping around here, we leave out some notes and this way create this kind of rhythmic irregularity. Out of a sudden you have this generative type vibe that I really enjoy, and you can even have some more control over it, because with the offset control you can, for example, set it all the way to the right side and this way basically mute your sound, because this chain selector is only operating in this right area where it never touches the area of the synthesizer sound. But if we bring it all the way to the left, we have all notes. And then by changing the offset control, you can basically find a good balance. So if it's in the middle, probably there's some 50% chance that the note gets triggered, and you can just explore all the stages in between. There's only one thing left now, which is to create this smooth looking device you saw in the intro. So instead of having this big chunk of intimidating looking theoretical audio effects, we have something easy to use that we can use in the most musical way. And for doing that, you can just click on one thing here and then once more click Command and A. So you select everything and then you press Command G, because then you group everything together into some instrument rack. And here you have those macros, and for now we only need 4 of them, because what you saw me doing in the intro was the rate mapped to macro 1, then the chance of the pitch mapped to the second one, the chance of the octave to the third one, and the offset of the LFO mapped to the fourth one. And now by just one click you can close all those audio effects and are left only with those 4 knobs. And then I just gave them a color, so you can right click and choose a color. You can also press on some macro, press Command R and give it another name. And then afterwards it just looked like this. You can download the project file and also the rack for free. The link is down below in the description, although it's also a pay what you want function. So in case you feel like supporting my channel, you can also do it there. Of course, I'm also just happy about any like, comment or new subscriber. And this video you should also check out, because it's about some super unique rhythm trick that has a lot of potential for making your music more exciting. And also you can find find more links down below in the description for other videos that catch up on the topic of this one. Apart from that, lots of inspiration with whatever it is that you create, and hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye!